Hey guys, how's everybody doing today? I wanted to make a quick video to give you a little feedback about assignment B, assignment C, some of the things that you're seeing, some of the things that you're doing in that assignment. If you look, I have referred back to page 9 of the textbook to figure 1-7. I really like this diagram because it gives you several switches, several routers to play with, and it lets you practice entering these commands. And oddly enough, you really have to have a very consistent path across all of these devices to be able to see everything work. So it's nice practice. It's a nice way to look at things. What I'm going to do is, just by way of example, I'm not going to do figure 1-7 because that kind of has an unring the bell type of effect. And by unring the bell, I mean once I tell you what the answer is, it's kind of hard for you to go back and see it for the first time to do it for yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a piece of it to let me talk about several things, and you can go from there. If you look at Packet Tracer, what I'll start out by doing is we'll add things as we need them. Okay, I'm going to add a router, and a switch. I chose 2621 routers. The reason I chose 2621s is they are modular, but because of the way this is set up, I really need to have two Ethernets. Now, if you look up here at this one, you can see that I have my chassis up here available. I really don't need anything. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to cover, and you see they won't even let me put a cover up there without turning this router off. So I'm going to put a cover up here just to cover up the empty slots in the router, which is what I do in the real world. And I'm going to come over here to this one. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I want to talk a little bit about serial connections. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this guy off. I'll cover up one of the ports. I'll put a WIC 1T, which if you read down here, you can see the 1T is just a SDLC or synchronous serial connection, one port. So that's what I'm dealing with. And I'll find my network module cover, and I'll turn this guy back on. Okay. I'll come down here to the switch. If we go to the CLI, now I realize you can come in here and go through config tab. The problem with this is a simulator. In the real world, you're not going to have that config tab on a switch. So going that route is a little bit problematic because it's not what you're going to see in the real world. So you want to get used to going to the command line. When I come in here to the command line, like we talked about in previous videos, I'm in a look but don't touch or user mode with this switch greater than prompt. So I'm going to say enable, and my prompt changes to switch pound, which is a privileged mode, and I can do configure terminal, which will change me to global mode, or conf T. Now, when you look at this switch, in the diagram, they've got every one of these listed as switch 1. I could do this all with one switch, but I would need a technique for breaking the switch up into multiple broadcast domains that we haven't learned yet. So I'm going to use individual switches. This switch between router 1 and router 2, I will call switch, or SW R1 R2. And you can see I now have SWR1 R2. I will make my enable secret password please. I will go in and I will set up my console port. I will put a passive please there, and I will require a login. I'll set up my telnet 0 to 15. Again, we'll make my pass please, and I will ask for it at login. Now, when they're showing a network address, like if you look in the book between R1 and R2, they have 192.168.2.0. That is a network address. That is not a host address. You cannot configure that address on a host, a switch, anything. We haven't got to the point that we're actually putting addresses on switches yet. When we do, we actually will put that on the management VLAN, not on an actual individual interface. So really at this point, other than naming the switch, putting passwords on it for getting from one mode to the other, or putting passwords on it for remote access purposes like for Telnet and for consoling in, we're really not doing anything to the switch. We're using it as a passive device. It's just like the concentration device in any star network. So really at that point, I'm kind of finished with the switch. I can come over here and cable by getting a straight through cable and going from my fast Ethernet to a switch port here. And I will go from my fast Ethernet to another switch port. Now, if you notice, they're still red. Normally, when you connect to a switch, the light turns amber for about 42 to 45 seconds while the switch goes through spanning tree protocol before it turns green. But this is a clap with one hand type scenario. Since I don't have either one of these routers configured, the Ethernet interface on the router side is actually administratively down. So there's no way that switch can attempt to bring that link up. If I come over here and go into the router, you see the CLI. It's trying to go into a configuration mode, and if I hit Control C, it will let me out of that. Now, again, I'm in the user mode, so I hit Enable to go to, or I enter Enable to go to Privileged, Conf T. I can make this host name R1. I'll put in a secret password of please. I'll put a password on console port that's please. I will ask for it at login. I will configure my 4 telnet lines, make their password please, and ask for them at login. Now at this point, I pretty much have the basic configuration done for this router. So what I actually need to do is I need to set up my two interfaces. So if I look at interface F00, which is the first fast Ethernet, I would have the address, let me look at the book for a second. I would have the address 192.168.1.254. Now the thing that's interesting to remember with this is that address becomes, oh my bad, I just typed IP, I didn't type IP add, sorry. If you notice here where I made a mistake and I just typed IP, I forgot to type IP add or IP address, the caret tells me the first thing it sees that it didn't understand. So I know that something between IP and the actual address was where the problem was. And I can do a no shutdown to bring that interface up. But what I was saying was now whenever I add another switch and a computer over here, one, that's configured, so you saw the switch go into spanning tree and try to bring that up. But the other thing is when I configure this computer now, that address that I just put on that router over there is my default gateway address for this PC. And what I always do is I always come to the command prompt and run a little IP config just to make sure that everything took. You see that I've got green all the way, so I can actually ping to see if my gateway is good, and it is. What this is showing is that I can get from this PC to this router. We'll come into this switch and configure it real quick. Enable conft, we'll say host SWR1 LAN. The reason I'm naming it that is it is the LAN supporting the computer hanging off R1. I'll make my password, please. I'll configure my console terminals. Ask for that password at login. I'll set up my 16 telnet lines. And basically now that switch is configured. I can go back in the router and finish what I'm doing. I had the other interface F01, which is that interface that's leading into the switch between R1 and R2. And I'm looking and I see that address is going to be IPAD 192.168.2.253. And now you see that switch attempting to bring that interface up. If I come over here to this router, again, I can hit Control-C to get out of Nancy Reagan mode. Now we have host name R2. I'll make my passwords, please. I'll set up my console port. Now the thing I need to do is I need to set up that interface coming back there. So I'll go with interface F0/0. And if you notice in the book, that would be 254. So I can IP add 192.168.2.254. And now shut that guy. And we're going to give this a second. And while we're doing that, I'm going to come back over here and look in this router. And what you'll see is if I do show IP route, which is the command to look at the routing table, you see that I have two entries in here, 192.168.10, 192.168.20. These are both directly connected networks. The 192.168.1 is this network right here, as shown in figure 1.7, 1-7, under this first switch, and this is the 2 network, right? If you notice, I don't have any information about anything else going on. If I come over here and look in this router, same thing. I have one directly connected network. What if I tried to ping to this computer from this router? It's going to fail. Well, why is it going to fail? I'm attempting to ping the 192.168.10 network, but if you look at my show IP route, the only thing this router knows about is 192.168.2.0. So what I need is I need a routing protocol. And the routing protocol that we're going to use would be RIP. RIP is a very simple routing protocol. All you have to do is type in router RIP and then give the address of directly connected networks. And notice this is not a host address, this is a network address. This is that address ending in 0. Okay? Now, a lot of people at this point will come in here and go, oh, okay, so now I should learn everything. And they'll do show IP route, and it still just says directly connected. Well, again, this is clapping with one hand. This is the only router running RIP, so at this point, it doesn't have anybody to talk to. So for RIP to actually work, what I need to do is come in here to this guy and do router RIP. and put the network in for the two networks that it knows about. It knows about 192.168.1, and it knows about 2. So now, if I do show IP route again, give it a second. And look over here, I have a route learned via RIP. The reason the other router doesn't show a route learned via RIP is at this point, it knows about all the routes that are out there. They're directly connected. Now, if I try my ping again, look at what happens. The first one failed because it's finding its way to it. But then all of a sudden, look what happens. It's successful. I could do the same thing from over here on the PC and say ping 192.168.2.254 and ping from the PC all the way over to this router. This is just a quick example of how we would set that up. I'll do another video a little bit later showing you how to set up the serial connection, but this should give you a good idea about beginning on setting up some of these simple networks. Have a great week.